So this was probably my favorite episode of Man in the Arena so far. I think in the first two episodes, they were a little overdramatic with a couple of the situations that happened, really, with Drew Bledsoe leaving and Lawyer Mueller leaving. I think my friend Zando described it best. They kind of painted the picture as if they were really depressed. But in this episode, it was really motivational and uplifting, and a lot of that had to do with the culture of the team. I'll get into the culture in a little bit, so let me summarize what happened before the culture. So it began with Brady kind of, realizing he was training his body like shit. He kind of was just living a celebrity lifestyle, eating out, partying, all that stuff in the offseason. And he came into the 2004 season realizing, like, I got to take better care of myself if I want to keep on winning Super Bowls. And, well, I think that kind of is what's and ultimately ended up starting the TB12 regiment. The expectations for this team was also so much higher than what it was going into the 2003 season. Because with the 2003 season, and even with the 2002 season, the Patriots were a good team. But now that they have won 2 Super Bowls and had that under their belt, and especially going 14-2 in that season, people were expecting for them to do a lot better than they were. And even though they ultimately did end up going 14-2, they played a lot more dominant football than they did in 2003. And there were kind of like these feelings of a dynasty brewing in the preseason. They knew that they had a good team. They knew that they were well coached. They knew the culture around the team was really good. So they were like, hey, we can make something out of this. And speaking of culture, when they brought players in, they had to make sure that they fit their specific culture. Corey Dillon was a great example. When they traded for the former Bengal running back, they had to make sure that he fit the culture, and one of those things was making sure that nobody was bigger than the team. So then they get into week 1, Brady, once again dominates Peyton Manning, is up to 5-0 in his career against him. And then week 2, they started to really see Dillon become a big workhorse. And the Patriots just kept on winning and winning. Going into 2004, they had won 15 games in a row. Eventually, they started 7-0 and were able to win 21 straight games. Then week 8 comes around and they play the red-hot Pittsburgh Steelers, and they just get absolutely demolished by them. The final margin may have only been by 14 points, but with the way the Patriots played, it felt like the Steelers were winning by 50. And they mentioned something I really agree with. It was good to kind of have a reset button in the middle of the season. You normally get your reset during the off season. You have time to look back at how the season played out. Even if you won the Super Bowl, you can still make corrections. But when you have a reset button in the middle of the season, it allows for the team to almost humble themselves. The Patriots just won 21 in a row. They needed almost a wake-up call. It's like, hey, you guys aren't this perfect team. You guys aren't this God squad. You are still a beatable football team. And that loss to the Steelers really shifted the tide for the Patriots season.
I think in the end, Coach Belichik loved the fact that that happened. After 21 games, I think he was ready for the bubble to burst.
You don't know what kind of culture you have until, things aren't going well. And when you're winning 21 games in a row, the culture looks pretty good. When you have some failure or you don't do some things that you're supposed to do, then you'll define what your culture looks like and how strong it is.
Brady, Bruschi, and Vrabel also said that the loss gave Belichick the ability to get pissed off at the team. So even though they kept on winning, Belichick still coached them hard, all that stuff. He would point out maybe 5 or 6 plays in a win that he would go over, but he could never get super mad at them. But after a loss like this, it gave him an excuse to practically just rip his team a new one. And this was known as suppressing success. He didn't want the team to get, full of themselves, have their egos go super high. He wanted to make sure that they knew that they still had a job to do, the whole do your job thing. And it was hard coaching. It was Belichick's attitude. He was basically an old curmudgeon of a coach. He still is an old curmudgeon of a coach. But even back then, when he wasn't super old as he is now, he was basically a curmudgeon. He would get grumpy. He's been the same guy ever since he's been coaching the Patriots. And the suppressing success thing really went a long way towards helping the team. Belichick also wanted to see competition amongst the teammates. They were describing stuff like, oh, you only watch film for an hour? Well, I watch it for 3 hours. Oh, you got in practice a half hour early? Well, I got here 1.5 hours early. a lot of this was relatable to Kobe's Mamba mentality. I feel like these two are pretty much the same thing, just never being satisfied with what you're doing, always trying to be the best, doing anything you can to be the best. And this, they ended up calling themselves the Edgers just because they always wanted to have an edge on their competition, whether it was their own teammates or someone on a different team. This helped carry the team to a bunch of wins. By week 17, they were 13-2. The only other loss came at Miami, which, you know, it's tradition that Brady always loses in Miami. But they already had their playoff seeding set. They were going to be the number 2 seed no matter what. They were going to get a bye, but regardless, the team still played their starters because Belichik said that's what they had to do. So a 14-2 finish to the regular season led to them playing the Colts in the divisional round. They dominate. Brady ends up going to 6-0 against Peyton Manning so far in his career. And then they had a rematch with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who handed them, you know, one of the biggest losses the team has ever suffered. And going to Pittsburgh for them was so bad. It was in the middle of a blizzard. The hotel they had was a complete shithole, and a lot of players were coming down with illnesses. Brady himself even said that he had the flu really bad the night before the game. The Patriots ended up dominating the Steelers more than the Steelers dominated them earlier in the regular season, and Brady said that this was his most satisfying non-Super Bowl win. And for it to be a super satisfying win and not being a Super Bowl, you know that team played damn well that day. So Super Bowl time once again for New England, and this time they were going up against a really tough Philly defense. They had guys like Brian Dawkins, Hugh Jackson, Javon Curse. That Philly defense that year was loaded. So something I completely forgot about until they brought it up in the documentary was Philly had released their plans for the parade like a week before the Super Bowl even began. I'm not trying to, like, you know, taunt New England, but that was a pretty dumbass move because you can kind of see why it's a dumbass move. I don't know why I'm having trouble explaining it, but it's like, at least win the game first before you know, explain the plans. They got way too ahead of themselves, and Belichik was able to use this as motivation for the team. And going into the game, the team kind of knew that back-to-back Super Bowls was really obtainable, and that also helped motivate them. But Philly may have been their toughest opponent yet. I already mentioned how good their defense was, but the past 3 years, they were so close to winning it. 3 straight NFC Championship games in a row. And Brady himself even said that this was probably the most difficult Super Bowl he ever played in, and that's including him overcoming a 25-point deficit against the Falcons. And something that didn't help was they had to have a backup rookie cornerback on Terrell Owens. And even though Owens was on one leg, he was still pretty dominant that game. Something that helped the Patriots was that it was a close game the entire time. And even though the previous Super Bowl was also close, this Super Bowl was even closer, and that allowed for the Patriots to stick with their game plan. Them always being in the game, they didn't really have to change what they had to do offensively. So the Patriots were up by 10 late in the fourth quarter, and then classic Andy Reid time management ends up biting him in the ass once again. They were driving down the field, but he was taking, you know, his sweet old time, wasn't really rushing, and had they had more of an upward pace in that offensive drive, very good chance the Eagles would have won this Super Bowl. So the Birds got within 3 with less than 2 minutes left, and then the Patriots committed a 3-and-out. And I really love that Teddy Bruschi mentioned this. He gave a lot of credit to the punter Josh Miller because he came up with a clutch punt that ended up essentially sealing the game. He was able to nail the Eagles with in their own 5-yard line, and that resulted in Dominic McNabb eventually throwing an interception and the Patriots winning their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years. I found Brady's comments pretty interesting on how he felt after the game. He said he was happy and all, but he was just tired. He just felt overwhelmed. And I mean, he did say this was his most difficult Super Bowl he ever played, so that explains a good bit of it. But he said the first few times he went, it's like, oh yeah, awesome, let's go. But he said after the 3rd time, it's like, is this shit ever going to end? And something pretty big I took away from this episode was the Patriots' ability to keep the same mentality for as long as they did, is far more impressive to me than the amount of championships they won in that time. Because the mentality helped win those championships. They don't get those Super Bowls without the mentality Belichick was able to install. And to do it for such a long time is just so freaking impressive. So that's it for today's video. Make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button. It goes a long way towards supporting me and this channel. Also, make sure you hit that bell icon so you never miss when I upload one of these videos. I'm doing one for every episode of Man in the Arena that's released, so make sure you hit that bell icon so you never miss an episode. Also, make sure you go follow all my social media links listed down in the description below. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.